Hello again, and welcome to today's webinar, the Dragos Platform, Leading Edge OT Cyber Visibility, Detection, and Response when you need it the most. Again, I'm Sam Wilson, Product Marketing Manager here at Dragos. A couple of quick housekeeping items today. The session is going to be recorded, and we'll send the recording out after the webinar. So if you miss it or you want to share it with friends, you'll be watching it later, we hope. Secondly, we have your lines muted, but we still really want you to interact with us. So please use the Q&A chat to submit any questions you've got throughout the webinar. We'll make sure to get our answers back to you. If not live during the session, we'll try to follow up afterwards. And we will be saving some time at the end for Q&A as well. So with that, I'd like to also introduce my co-presenter today, Kimberly Graham, Senior Director of Product Management here at Dragos. All right, let's take a look at what we'll cover during the session. So we don't assume that everyone's familiar with our offerings. So we're going to be giving a good general overview of our platform. We've made a bunch of updates recently to it in the 2.1 version. So we'll explain what some of those are and why we feel they're important. Secondly, we'll be going over the different virtual and physical appliances and the options we have for customers. And then, as I said, at the end, we'll cover some Q&A as well. All right, there's a couple of central concepts to understand that really define the ethos of our company. This little diagram on the left here kind of illustrates the fact that the way that we view the customer challenges that we're helping to solve, it really has our platform kind of in the middle. But there's a bunch of things that surround that we feel make us different in the marketplace. We're probably best known for our threat intelligence, and specifically that's dedicated to OT and ICS. We have a lot of customers that use our threat intel service called Worldview. But what some people don't realize is that the intel that our analysts produce as part of that service also feed the Dragos platform in different ways, and we'll explain those before we're done here today. Also at the bottom right, you'll see we have different professional services or global services, as we call them. And these service teams, in their engagements in the field, they're often using the platform for different assessments to collect telemetry for incident response. And so we're using the same tool ourselves in customer engagements, even if that customer may not have the platform licensed. But of course, there's the benefit of having it licensed and on-premise too. And then lastly, we have some offerings and some capabilities that are kind of unique around how we engage with the community. We'll talk about something called Neighborhood Keeper before we're done. But this collection of things together really represents something that's very different and very special, we feel, for our customers. It gives you a set of capabilities that's powerful together. We're very community focused in terms of sharing our knowledge and resources with those that are on the front lines trying to safeguard civilization. And then we have probably the largest and most experienced set of OT cyber experts and practitioners in a single company that's focused just on these different industries. So these things together, we codify them, we say, and it goes into our products and services to help you as our customers. So what are some of the big challenges we're hearing out of our customers, and how do we align our services and our solutions to these? There's a fundamental challenge a lot of customers have, and that's just knowing what's running on their network, on their environment. If you work in this industry, you understand this is a problem for different reasons. People outside of the industry often can't get their head wrapped around that, because why not just, do a Nmap scan of your network and away you go? It's not that easy, and we'll get into some of that before we're done. So part of this kind of OT or asset visibility is just knowing what and where your crown jewels are, your most important assets, having a good, accurate inventory. In fact, there's regulations that have come out recently where you have to have this information updated on a scheduled basis. And then just being able to spot or pinpoint changes that are unexpected on your network is critical to, like, threat detection, for example. Secondly, and this is a question a lot of you probably dread, and maybe some of you dread asking, but am I compromised? Is there a threat actor in my environment that I don't know about or that intends to cause some type of harm? So this includes things like seeing unauthorized traffic, especially if it's north-south between the IT and OT boundaries. It could be east-west traffic as well that could signify some threat activity. And then, looking at files that are getting transferred across your environment, do they have a hash of something that's known to be bad? And then looking at the behaviors, right? Are these adversaries or these threat groups, they leave very specific fingerprints that we've built a lot of expertise around raising through alerts to you, so that you can know to follow up and look into what's going on. And then the area of vulnerabilities. So a lot of you will have technology that's it could be in some cases decades old, but hopefully not more than a few years old. But it sits in the environments for a long time, and there's always new vulnerabilities that are getting found, even in legacy equipment. So being able to understand how important is this, what's the real risk level, what are the different mitigations and controls I can enforce to manage this risk. A lot of compliance regulations have to do with managing vulnerabilities in your environment. How do you take the resources, those limited finite resources you've got, and use them most effectively to maximize what those teams are doing, so they can focus on what matters most, right? And that's your end customers, whether it's keeping lights on, the power flowing, water safe, whatever it is. That's really what you're in the business of. And these cyber things kind of should be secondary to keeping operations going. And then lastly, if you are compromised, how do you respond quickly? Right. So incident response is a very specialized area, but we give customers the tools to forensically look at what's happened in their environment over time. You can, we have a timeline view that you'll see before we're done, where you can scrub backwards and forwards and see changes in network communications, and then being able to coordinate between your teams, right? So this means having case management tools, so you can take notes for incident response. You can assign it to individuals for follow-up. You can tie it to different vulnerabilities or threats that we've raised alerts on. So this coordination really helps the teams to work together to mitigate some of the different threats and risks that would be in your environment. And lastly, we take the expertise that we've built over the years as practitioners, many of us sitting in the same seats that you are today, and we've built playbooks around these things. So you don't have to wonder, what do I do with this CVE? Or I've seen these different composite triggers fire in my environment. What do I do next? You don't have to be in that panic state of not knowing what to do. We'll help you along in that process through these playbooks. So what we really like and appreciate is your thoughts. We've just got a very simple poll that we'll show for a few seconds here. We'll give maybe 30 seconds for people to respond. Which of those different challenge areas that I just went through is your organization currently focused on? And you can choose multiple ones as well. Okay, so let's close that poll. And I know some of you are curious to see the results. So asset visibility, vul management, threat detection. So those are all kind of neck and neck. Investigation response. Okay, interesting. So I think that based on that, you'll see a lot of areas of potential opportunity, places that we can help you and your organization to keep your environments hopefully safer. All right, so how does this all relate together? As I said at the start, we're probably best known in the market for our threat intelligence. We believe it's some of the best that's out there. And then also our global professional services. Those two are very well established, very well known, but for just as long, we've had a platform offering that addresses a bunch of core capabilities that we feel OT or ICS cyber teams really need to have as a foundation. And those three areas, as we describe them, are around visibility, detection, and response. So I explained some of that before. And then we have this thing where, which we call OT watch. If your team lacks the resources or the expertise to do things like threat hunting or triage on alerts, or you would rather outsource that to a trusted partner, we have this service called OT Watch, where we'll take a lot of that on behalf of your organization. We'll do the triage, we'll do proactive threat hunting, and then on a regular basis or ad hoc as needed, we'll reach out and send updates to your management team around exactly what's going on, what the main threats are, where to focus on for next steps. So that's OT Watch. And then I mentioned earlier too, we have this community aspect to our business as well. But there's an offering called Neighborhood Keeper, and we've had webinars on this, and we'll likely do more this year still. But this is really a unique offering that offers kind of collective defense, is a term you might have heard, but it's community-wide, visibility around assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. And I'll explain more about Neighborhood Keeper in just a minute here too. So let's take a quick look at a few of these areas in a bit more depth. So when it comes to asset visibility, that includes not only knowing the assets that are in your environment, so like inventory of those systems, but having a very good profile on what those different assets are. And there's different ways you can increase your confidence level of knowing exactly what it is that's out there based on how it's communicating and the role that it's playing. So we think of asset inventory as, having a baseline that you're working from. This often feeds other integrated systems, and Kim will explain some of the integrations we have before we're done here today. But being able to, create asset groups, for example, that you're forwarding on to partner or third-party firewalls. You might have a CMDB that you need to manage those asset lists in. So our platform can integrate and exchange data with these other systems you likely have in your environment today. Being able to see these assets not only in a tabular form, which is great if you want to export CSVs or do filtering or sorting, but if you can see it visually and then customize that per the needs of the individual that's looking at the data. So this might include grouping assets by a certain attribute, creating zones that align with different operational procedures that you have. This is an important aspect of cyber asset management. I'll just call it that. And then lastly, seeing how things change over time in your environment. That timeline view gives you a kind of sense of context over time as things change. You can see that with the tools we provide. Secondly, around visibility, the coverage you have in terms of the protocols, not only the IT standard protocols that a lot of the IT cyber vendors provide, but most of you will understand in the ICS or the OT world, there's a lot of very specific protocols that you need support for that you might not get from some of those other vendors. So having a partner that is able to provide and to enhance their protocol coverage, looking at using those to dissect the information that's flowing across the network. There's a lot of config data and commands that are sent across the wire. And if you can't see those, then you won't really know or have a true picture of what's happening in your environment. So all of this helps with the accuracy, but also the insight of the devices and the endpoints that are communicating with each other in your operational environment. So, we will show some of this before we're done too, but having a breadth and a depth of coverage around the different vendors in the environment, the equipment, the model families that they have, the different protocols some of them require, capturing the activity, so knowing source and destination, but also the contents of that information. And then lastly, because a lot of your worlds are becoming much more connected, for different reasons, knowing when there's any unauthorized traffic outside of your environment, being able to spot that and go back in time and see what happened and when could be critical to mitigating a possible incident. A couple of versions ago on our platform, we introduced what we believe is probably the strongest offering in the market today around OT vulnerability management. And this takes a combination of things that we're able to provide that we're not seeing elsewhere. So a lot of vendors have different threat analyst teams. They're looking for new vulns. Kim, maybe when we get to you, if you want to talk about the fact that we're now a CNA, that's an important thing. But we're taking the intelligence that our threat intel teams are coming up with constantly. We're feeding into the platform, and not only do we show you the vulnerabilities in a manner that you can use to prioritize which ones are most serious and which ones to work on, but it gives you detailed guidance on how to mitigate or manage those different vulnerabilities. So there are things that we do that we feel are very helpful to customers to quickly get through a lot of information. So we take the public CVEs, and in many cases, because of our understanding of how these systems are deployed in practice, we're able to provide context that might increase or decrease the risk score of those CVEs. So we're correcting it, but we're also adding information and context to those so that you get a better understanding of, in my environment, this is why this matters more or less than it does in general. We do this through things like providing what we call now, next, or never guidance. If something's critical, not only publicly, but based on our guidance, we still feel it's something that should be addressed quickly, we'll give it a now category. Those that are maybe less urgent, you can deal with once the critical ones are out of the way, so those are next. And then there are some that, for different reasons that we explain, and you'll see the detail with the platform, we feel that there are just kind of back burner items. You know that they're there, and you can deal with those if and when you feel you have the bandwidth to work on them. And as part of our vulnerability management solution, not only do we help you to detect vulnerabilities, but also to manage them. So you can open up any of them and update the status over time, so that you can go back and you can say, okay, this was a critical vulnerability. We decided to act on it on this date, or we decided to suspend it, or we've dealt with it and now it's closed. So there's these different states that you can use as part of the vulnerability management solution, which is quite powerful. The threat detection, as I said earlier, we're probably one of the better known companies out there, and we have a large number of threat analysts that are constantly tracking different threat groups, looking at their tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, over time. So as they evolve, we're updating some of the information that's flowing into the platform through knowledge packs, and we'll explain those before we're done. And we like to say that the value that we add is AI, but not artificial intelligence, but actual intelligence. So we have a lot of man hours of human analysts that are going behind these threat updates we're able to add to the platform. And we're not just blindly trying to analyze data, but we're looking at the context and behavior we've seen in other customer environments to give you the latest information possible on what's a true positive or a false positive, and how to handle those different threats as you see them. One of the most successful demonstrations I think we've had of the platform, there's a thing that's coordinated, I think, on an annual basis, but it's the MITRE attack system for ICS. Vendors can optionally enter the challenge, and they can see how well their technology holds up to the different challenges sort of that MITRE has put together for ICS. And I can say, and we have this documented on our website, we performed exceptionally well in being able to detect correctly a large number of very diverse threats that were part of the eval. So we provide customers with highly curated IOCs, and then standard things, of course, like IPs that are known to be tied to threat actors, different domains or different hashes that these teams have picked up in their work. And then, of course, if there's any traffic that is outside of the expected norms, we do baselining in our environment, so you can see if there's a delta between what's typical and what's happened. And this is the last point here is very important as well. Not only are we looking at single detections that by themselves could still be significant, more importantly, we're stitching together a series of them in a composite format. And these are the things that give you even a higher confidence that a specific threat group might be active in your environment. So that's something that, again, we feel is very powerful. And then lastly, for incident response, everyone is under attack. Unfortunately, in some cases, the attacks are successful. So if that happens to you, you want to make sure that your teams, even if they're not incident response experts, they have at least foundational capability in their tool set to manage the incident. Again, we have services that we can provide to help with this, but for those companies that are able to do a lot of it on their own, our platform provides case management tools where you can go in and you can add notes, you can triage different alerts, you can assign things, and this is kind of an important part of that closed loop cycle that's a core part of our platform. All right, so I mentioned OT Watch earlier. I described it probably good enough there. I don't need to go into it again here, but just be aware that if you need a managed version of the platform with threat hunting, this is something we can provide through the OT Watch team. Neighborhood Keeper, and again, I'd love just to go into this in depth on this webinar, but it's a free opt-in program, so only Dragos platform customers can use this. They opt into it, and it gives you visibility into the assets, the threats, and the vulnerabilities of other Dragos customers that are on the platform. So this is useful because there might be a question you're asking yourself around, is anyone else seeing this in their environments? And we have built in recently something called request for assistance. So if you're faced with an incident or you have a question around something that you're seeing, you can confidentially reach out to other participants. They don't know the identity of who you are until there's a connection established between you, and then you can exchange contact information and take things offline. We have trusted advisors that are a part of this program as well. And different participants, the information they can see is only scoped to their industry and their region. So you can't see everything that's within Neighborhood Keeper, but we've got permissions set up such that what we feel is most helpful to you is what you'll be able to see without knowing specifically who the other companies are that have also been feeding their aggregated data into Neighborhood Keeper. Okay, so Kim, maybe if I can pass it over to you, and if you can start by providing a quick overview of our integrations, and then we'll circle back after you're done with some Q&A.
Sure, absolutely. I'll go ahead and share my screen. That should be the same slide. All right, so as Sam said, I'm Kimberly Graham. I'm the Senior Director of Product for the Dragos Platform. And I'll take over here and talk about integrations. And then, of course, we'll be happy to answer questions, as Sam said earlier. So with the platform, we've been focused on meeting customer needs for integrations for various different use cases. So things like SIMs, where you want to take all of the events that are firing, all the notifications that are firing, the threat detections, everything, put them into a SIM. We work with a wide variety of SIMs. We have native integrations. With some of them, we'll put an app in the store, but because we can ship syslog, of course, we can really work with any type of integration. But we do have things like a Splunk app and things to make it a little bit easier to digest the information. And actually, the Splunk app does quite a bit more even with the worldview data. We also integrate with like network devices, so this provides the ability for us to get access into network taps and spans and that kind of thing, even with things like data diodes and so on. And we're certified to work on a wide variety of equipment, different types of networking equipment. For firewalls, we do some integrations where we do things like shipping lists of IPs based on criteria. So if you're looking to do some sort of active blocking or rule proposal, we're not in there flipping the switches in your firewall, but we will provide the data to the firewall, so that way you can decision or action on it, either automatically or manually. We integrate with CMDBs such as ServiceNow. ServiceNow integration is very very interesting. It's a very tight integration that allows you to pull in all of your OT assets into their OT asset management, as well as all the vulnerability information from our vulnerability management into ServiceNow. So if you're used to working with ServiceNow workflows, or that's where you're pulling IT data, that works very well, and actually is just us with an app basically in their store, working through a ServiceNow mid server. And we can work with Exonius and others we're working on. We also work with historians and can pull some unique information depending on what your use cases are there. And we're working on right now an endpoint integration framework that will allow us to pull information from endpoints. So that will augment our asset inventory. It'll allow us to get visibility into threat detections that are firing on the endpoints, so we can correlate those to other things that are going on at the network level where we're watching. So we're starting with CrowdStrike, and then we'll be moving on to McAfee, and then watch this space. You'll see some more endpoints get added to this list. And then of course, SOAR vendors. We have an open API, so our integrations obviously can work with more than just this list. This is where we have our partnerships, and we've been working with various partners on integrations. But the platform has a very robust API, and there's a lot you can do with it. So if there's any integration needs for pulling data for any type of automation, if it's the SOAR or something like that, there's usually the functionality there in the platform. So I'll talk a bit about protocols. This is, of course, not our entire protocol list. We support, hundreds of protocols, both OT and IT, for threat detections, asset AD, for looking at baselines, looking at function codes, all those different things that Sam talked about that we pull apart for all of those different use cases are supported by different protocols. And this is just kind of a list of some of the major OT vendors that you'll see in terms of our protocols. But we do support a very wide variety. So if you're not seeing something on here, it's probably on our list. We do have a data sheet that provides all of that information. So the way that the protocols and the protocol support, as we add additional, or we find a unique edge case where maybe the protocol is not working quite to spec. We see that kind of thing quite a bit. We issue updates via knowledge packs. So knowledge packs is how you update the platform. It's how you update everything in the platform. So that could be new detection. So if there's new activity groups, there's new threat groups that we see, that are out there as we do our research, we're going to include those detections in a knowledge pack. Same for if we're, finding specific exploits as a major event. Sometimes there are ones that spill in from the IT side into the OT side, like Log4j, and so on, and we'll build detections for those. We tend to release these monthly. It's kind of a 4 to 6 week cycle, because we want to make sure that we're packing in as much as we can, and we know that there are restrictions on how often a lot of our customers can update. But we do release when there are major events. So you saw that with Log4j. We cut a release immediately, just so that way we could cover it as quickly as we could. So we're not waiting around. So if there is there is a threat group or someone that is doing something that we want to make sure that you all have visibility into, then of course we're going to release a knowledge pack right away, just with that delta. We also do characterizations inside the knowledge pack. So these are things like the asset characterization. So it's telling us, what is this equipment made of? What are the different components of it? What are the firmwares? What's the vendor? What's the operating system? Everything that we can get from passive. And we do that through that protocol, that robust protocol dissection. So we'll look into the different OT protocols. We'll look into IT protocols as well. We'll pull it apart. We'll use that for threat detection. We'll use it for baselines, and we'll use it for that characterization, because the asset identification is what powers our vulnerability management, as Sam was saying. So The more robust our asset inventory, then the more likely we are to release high confidence vulnerability detections, because we do give you a confidence value. If we only see a few different data points in the wire, that's going to be a lower confidence finding. We'll still show it to you. But if we can see them, the more we can see, if we're layer 2 connected, actually can see the traffic, then we'll be able to give you a high confidence vulnerability finding. We also have things like playbooks. So as Sam was talking about the OT expertise, when we're out in the field and we're doing incident response and doing network vulnerability assessments and managing with our OT watch, a lot of that allows us to use that knowledge and intelligence to generate playbooks. So this is how we deliver some of that expertise that we have in the services side and in the threat intel side directly into the platform. Is not just here's a detection, we do that. Our detections are not just IOCs and lists of bad IPs and lists of domains. We have those kinds of things, and sometimes those are good indicators. But we actually do behavior detections. We say this activity looks like this specific threat group, and those are all delivered directly in the knowledge packs, and that's something that we kind of uniquely do. It's not a feed that you can get. We do have a feed, of course, through Worldview, but it's really just IOCs. The platform is able to really take advantage of that from an attacker behavior perspective. And then the playbooks that we have are in conjunction with that. So it's not just here's a notification and here's what here's something that the platform saw. We can say, here's what you can do to handle it. Here's what you can do to pull more information out of the platform or out of other systems in order to get all the information you need to understand what's going on in this specific incident. And then we'll tell you, how to do various different hunting inside the platform. So let's talk about what's new in Platform 2.1. So we just released Platform 2.1, and we do have another release scheduled before the end of this year. But in 2.1, we released primarily one of the more exciting things was Central Store. So Central Store is a new component of the Dragos platform that gives you a centralized view of assets, vulns, and notifications. If you're very widely distributed, very large organization, you need to have multiple site stores. We can pull that in. I've got a slide on that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Cloud-hosted deployment options. So we've built our platform as well in the cloud, in a cloud-native way. We know that some industries are not ready for the cloud, and that's fine. We do offer on-prem. Of course, this is not a cloud-only solution, clearly. But if you are interested in the cloud, we can run the platform in the cloud. So we can host it, and we can, with our OT watch, of course, we can manage it as well. Our new health and status dashboard, I'll actually show you a walkthrough of what that looks like. So we're giving more insight into what's going on, not just at the site store, but also at the sensors themselves. Notification and vulnerability overlays inside of the asset map. So we've been doing baseline overlays for a while where you can see baseline deviations, because we do have a baseline feature where you can look at new connections, new protocols between hosts, new hosts, new application values, new function codes, things that you haven't been seeing in the past. And we'll give you an overlay and say, here's where all the deviations are. We're doing the same thing now with vulnerabilities and notifications. You can say, here's which assets have notifications. Here are the assets that have vulnerabilities. So it's very easy to see that on a map that you've created, either structured or dynamic. And I'll show you what that looks like. We did some notification manager workflow enhancements. We've been focusing really heavily on user experience, and we have a user experience team that's been doing a lot of outreach to our customer base to find out, what are the things that would make your lives easier in terms of workflow. And we were able to knock this out to add a few things that I think are going to be tremendous value to our customers in terms of how they manage day-to-day things inside of Notification Manager, because that's what you're looking at in a lot of cases. What are the notifications coming in? Now that I have this, Sub 5 vulnerability or Sub 5 notification, maybe I want some more context. We've been able to pull in more context, make it easier to manage rules, a handful of things that we've done there. And very similarly, we've done the same thing with asset inventory. So we got some feedback around asset inventory, which we rebuilt in 1.8, added some more enhancements in 2.0, and now in 2.1, we're adding even more usability improvements. So this is ongoing. It's not that we're done with Notification Manager. We're not done with asset inventory. We're going to continue to listen to our customers and make sure that we're enabling easy workflows. So this is the new health and status dashboard, and I'll show you a little bit zoomed in since the one on the left is a little bit small. So we show you things like the service health, the site store. So is everything running as it should? What does the CPU look like? What does memory look like? File system and so on. And this is not a network device. High CPU is good in Dragos environment. We are always running these analytics across data that we've been pulling in. There's a lot of number crunching we do because we're not just doing those signature-based detections. So if you see the CPU usage up there, that's on purpose. We're doing a lot of analytics. You can look at how many sensors are connected. You can look at history of things, CPU usage and memory, just from a health standpoint of the platform. Same with network input and output at the platform. But really the most exciting thing is what we're pulling in from the sensors. So we pull in these per sensor health and status with history. So you can see CPU and memory and disk and the types of things you want to see operationally, but also some insights into how much traffic is coming into the sensor, in and out of the sensor, top protocols and top events. That's always been available. It's been available at the sensor, but this is a way to get it kind of directly in here in a nice visual way, so you can look at that and just kind of quickly see: do I see a protocol spike? Do I see a traffic spike? That's going to impact the notification. So it gives you a little bit more information now inside the platform, and we're going to continue to iterate on this and enhance it as we get feedback from customers. So if you're out there listening or you are an existing customer, give us your feedback on it, definitely. This is our notification overlay. So you can see we've got a toggle here for enabling the overlays on the assets. We've got some things. I've just done an explore map, not a structured map. We do have two map styles. Explore map is dynamic and you just do group by and it just kind of puts them into circles. Structured map is where you can say, I want to do a Purdue model type map, or I want to do a map by zone. We see a lot of different ways that customers want to visualize that. Some is even geographic, and the overlays work there too. So if you click the enable overlays in the assets, you can see we've overlaid the notifications on there, so it's easy to do that. And you can select all and then do things in bulk with those if you're interested in doing something with the results that you've gotten there. So now we'll talk a little bit about Central Store. So we consider this an evolution of the Dragos platform. So we had the site store and the sensor. The sensors do the passive data collection and network connection. These are the things that are, they can be virtual, they can be physical, they're on-prem, they're sitting there listening to your traffic in your environment. They're deployed in the lower levels of Purdue. So we can see all that traffic as much as we can gather. But we don't just take all that traffic and send it to the site store. We do a lot of kind of intelligent summarizing of the information to make sure that we're only sending what is interesting, and we're not overwhelming your network by sending too much data up toward the site store. The site store then takes that data and then does a lot of number crunching, and some of that is based on time. So we're looking at events as they're coming in, some of them kind of streaming in as this signature fire to this type of thing fire, but then there's a lot of kind of looking over the past. Okay, I'm going to look over what's been going on with a specific device, and then we'll trigger a notification. We'll trigger a threat detection based on the behaviors we've seen, based on our characterization, based on what it's doing and what it's been doing in the past. That all happens at the site store. That's the heavy number crunching that we do, and that's where we have those robust notifications. So we purposefully do a lot of that, kind of detailed analytics, because we don't want to give you a severity 4 or severity 5 unless it is something that's actually really critical. So that's where you'll see us kind of differ from some of the traditional IPS and IDS, where you get lots of these, very, very high severity things going on. If you see a Sev 4 or Sev 5, it's going to be something critical from us, and even Sev 3. So we take that site store information now and pull it into Central Store. That's why we say it's kind of the evolution of the platform. It's the next step. We take all of the objects that we create, notifications, assets, vulnerabilities that we've created in the site store, and we send those to the Central Store. So this allows us to take that bandwidth, pull it down even farther. We have some customers who, some of our initial customers driving Central Store that were design partners. Their biggest concern was bandwidth. We want to make sure that it's very low bandwidth between the sites and the Central Store. We've been able to pull that down even farther because we're not sending the raw data. We're doing the number crunching at the site store. The Central Store is just presenting it. So it gives you that view visibility, searching, reporting very, very fast, because we're able to basically dedicate that central store to just viewing and searching information. So we can also do things like role-based data permissions. So you can say this user can only see this one site store. This user can see all site stores. We're going to be adding granularity to that very soon. So it'll be by sensor, by zone, by network, and eventually by arbitrary value. That can be, we've launched with on-prem. We'll be adding virtual very soon, and cloud as well for central store. But that's kind of an exciting concept for us. And I'll talk a little about the function and kind of what we're trying to do with it. Because it gives you that OT visibility, the detection and response. It gives you that enterprise scale, because the scale might mean lots of site stores because you have a lot of geographically dispersed locations. So you have a site store in each location. You're going to pull that into the central place that goes into the central store. It may be because you have a lot of devices. We're not going to claim the central store can handle any load possible. You'll see some numbers that we have in terms of aggregate bandwidth when I go over the appliances. But there may be cases where just for scale, you need multiple site stores. You can pull that in to the central store as well. Multi-site, multi-organization. This is kind of another use case. We see where organizations are really a lot of other sub-organizations, and everybody wants their own kind of view. So you can have a central store and do that granular permissions and say, okay, everybody can see their own site, but then we do want the OT SOC, or we want the IT SOC or someone else to see everything globally. And then the kind of centralized risk management reporting. We allow you to run reports in the platform, exports, data exports, everything centralized. We do track it down to site still, so you know which site it came from, which organization. We actually have the concept of organization level mapping in Central Store, so you can have sub-organizations and then sub-sites underneath those organizations, just to give a little bit more structure than just a flat list of site stores. So in terms of the features that we have, it's focused right now on viewing and searching, assets, vulnerabilities, notifications, everything all in one spot, and it's very, very fast. Again, because we can dedicate all of the resources to doing the searching. It's a familiar UI if you've used your UI before, so it's similar. We've done some enhancements though. So like with asset inventory, you can do things like group by pivots. So you could say, I want to group by the asset type. You can click on PLC. I want to group by vendor now. Click on Rockwell. Now I want to group by firmware. Click on the firmware that you want to see. Now you've got a list of all Rockwell PLCs that have that specific firmware. So there's lots of things you can do that we can filter definitely in the site store today, but because we're able to build a new backend that's kind of focused on searching, we're able to do that here, and we will be bringing that to site store too. We also have this built-in dynamic interactive dashboard that gives you this organization-wide overview, or again, a kind of pared down view if you have lower data permissions. And we have something called follow me filters. I'll show you what that looks like. That's actually really fun. We have the user scoping that I talked about, the RBAC for data access. We still have RBAC as well, the idea of roles, and here are the functions you can perform. But then we also have it for here's what you can see. And then this is new. This is something also coming to site store very soon by the end of this year. We have support not just for local authentication. So if you want to use us for storing usernames and passwords for logging in, you can do that still. But we're supporting OIDC for SSO and MFA. So if you have an authentication provider like Azure AD or ADFS or Okta or an on-prem thing, you can use that OIDC connector to log into the platform. We do support multiple simultaneously. So if you have the use case of, well, we just acquired a company, or we just merged, and half the users go through one OIDC, one Azure AD, and the other ones go through the other Azure AD, we'll support multiple with local fallback. Central store dashboard. So this is that dashboard I was talking about. You can get an overview of the site store and sensor connectivity. Where my site store is connected? Are they connected? Are they enabled? Are my sensors connected in? But then we'll also give you an overview of high-level data points. So this is things like, how many assets do I have? How many new assets do I have? How many notifications are coming in? How many high severity notifications are coming in, and how many are recent? Same with vulnerabilities. So this is our first issue of this dashboard. We're actually releasing very soon some more dashboards that are built in, and then we'll be moving on to more customizable dashboards, because the searching engine behind this, for the technical folks, it's Elasticsearch. There's a lot of flexibility in what we can do here. So we'll be doing quite a bit more with this, but for now we want to make sure that we've got all the important data points all in one spot. It's interactive and it works with the follow me filters. So the follow me filters are fun because they do exactly that. They follow you. So if somebody sends you a link, for one, we do deep linking for all of our links. So you can easily send a link and someone's looking at the same data, assuming they have the same data access. But also as you navigate in the platform, you can set your follow me filter. So if you change it, you can see, the numbers here update. But what's important is that if I use that to navigate through the platform, that filter stays with me. So I don't get confused between different contexts. If I'm in the dashboard, or if I'm in vulnerability management, or if I click into asset inventory, it doesn't matter where I go, that filter is going to stay with me. And because we do deep linking, I can bookmark that as a favorite. That's a view I can always get back to. And then, of course, everything's clickable, so it's interactive. And we've done this all throughout the platform, all throughout the central store, is when you see these widgets and you see the data, it's not just a data point, you can actually click on it. So if there's 18 vulnerabilities that are prioritized as now, that's very interesting to me. I want to see what those are. So I can click on it, and you can see it takes me to the vulnerability management, where I see those 18 vulnerability detections. And the fun part is it's kept my follow me filter. That's why I only see 18. Now, if I want to change it, I could say, okay, now I know the 18 in that site. I could always click here and change my follow me filter to say, show me everything. And it's very easy for me to see all the that specific vulnerability, or all vulnerabilities that are prioritized as now throughout the environment. So we'll talk a bit about appliances. We have our central store appliance that is our CS50E. The capacity is ranked for 50 connected Dragos site stores up to, but we're doing flexible licensing. So, it's going to be a little bit different if you're only connecting a handful of appliances. And there's always numbers behind this. There's a certain amount of aggregate bandwidth that we can monitor. But looking at our customers and the customers that are looking at central store, 50 is about the number that we expect to see as our top end for this device. But actually, in some cases, we may be able to support more. But that's what we're looking at least as a cap for now. But we'll be able to do licenses at up to 10 and so on. We'll be flexible with that. Then we're also introducing very soon our virtual, which will be our virtual appliance for central store. Our site store appliances, we have our legacy site store appliance. We still have customers on that. We keep it on our slide because we still support it. We don't sell it, but we still support it. You can upgrade to Dragos Platform 2.1, still in the legacy. We want to make sure that we maintain compatibility as long as we can. Of course, our STS 500E is going to be more performant. It's got all SSDs in it and all of those things. The capacity that we're seeing in the STS 500E is 20 gigs of aggregate monitored traffic, which is a lot. That's a lot of traffic because you're going to have a lot of sensors deployed in your environments that have the capacity to see more, but they're almost never fully loaded. So this is way more than the typical traffic that we see in most environments, and that's with the new performance enhancements that we added to Platform 2.1. For virtual, we have an option that is more closely mirrors the STS 500. That one we can get up to 10 gigs of aggregated monitored throughput. We expect to increase both of these numbers actually as we add even more performance enhancements, because we've done some of it in Platform 2.1. We'll be doing a little bit more performance tuning in 2.2. Not a ton. The next big performance gain will be in the next release of the platform in 2.3, where we do even more performance increases, but we're already at pretty high throughput with these devices. And then later this year, we'll be introducing a smaller site store for smaller sites that will support a smaller amount of bandwidth, a smaller amount of sensors, but will have a lower footprint in the virtual environment. The footprints of these devices are heavy, and that's on purpose. We do a lot of detailed analytics. Again, this is not us doing any type of, just IDS style detections against signatures. We're doing heavy data processing. We leverage Elasticsearch, which of course is fairly memory heavy, but that allows us to look very quickly across very large data sets, so we can make sure that we're actually tracking true attacker behaviors and not just saying, we saw a packet with a signature in it. For sensor appliances, we have a lot of different options. We have our ruggedized models. So like a DIN rail mounted, fanless design, solid state, everything. 25 megabit, that's for those small remote sites. There are a lot of customers who have those types of sites where they just want a tiny little device. This is a good device for that. You can also mount on the wall if you want to. And then we've got our SEL box. You can see it. We kept the SEL blue. But that's a 100 megabit sensor. Again, ruggedized. If you're familiar with the 3355s, that's the platform that we're using. And that's quite popular in a lot of our customers. For enterprise data center, we call it enterprise data center because these are not ruggedized. But we do have some options there as well. So we have our NS100E, that's 100 megabit. You can also wall mount that. We see that sometimes in some cases, mounted to the wall or mounted to the side of a rack, wherever you can put it. And then we've got our NS500E, which is 500 megabit, and the NS1000E, which is our 1 gig 1U rack mount. That's our heaviest duty for now. But watch this space. And then for virtual, we've got some semi-equivalents to those. So we've got the 25 megabit, 100 megabit, and gig. We're actually going to be increasing that. Probably next year, we'll be adding a few more options just to get a little bit more granularity between that 100 and 1000. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to Sam for Q&A.
Great, thanks, Kim. Okay, so we had a lot of good questions that came in. Let me just pull a couple of those up, but I don't think we were able to get to just yet. I think these cover some important general areas rather than just answer the person back specifically. I'd like to open it up to the floor. So we had a question around certain protocols, which we did respond to, DNP3 traffic. I replied to that one. Here's a good one, Kim. I'd love to get some of your thoughts on. So how does Dragos vulnerability management service detect vulnerabilities due to security misconfigurations on the OT assets, which may not reflect in real-time network, but the security misconfigurations continue to exist in the OT asset or device? How would you respond to that one?
So our vulnerability detection, that is not it is a vulnerability detection. That's the type of it's vulnerability management. It's not in the configuration management and policy compliance space. We're looking at doing what we can in that space as well. Right now, we're not ingesting things like the the configuration of the device, but there's a lot we can see. So there's things that may not appear to show up, but we can sometimes see in the wire. So there are cases. There's actually a signature we're enhancing very soon. Not a signature, a detection that we're enhancing very soon. That's going to enhance our ability to detect key state changes on PLCs. So there's a lot of cases where you cannot see that data because the key state is not something that necessarily puts a packet on the wire in every case. But there's some undocumented ways for us to be able to actually detect that if it's pulled by an engineering workstation and things like that. So we do have some things coming up in the roadmap. We're not being super forward focused with this webinar. It's more about launching the 2.1. But if you're very interested, we can probably set up a roadmap session to talk through some of those things. And we do have some things coming up that's going to allow us to have a little bit more visibility and definitely allow us to get some of this information that's not necessarily broadcast directly onto the wire. One of the things I can point to that we have built recently is we have built some the ability to ingest some different project files to get us more visibility that we're doing directly from the OT vendors, and you'll see us build a little bit more on that.
Great. This one's kind of related. So the question is, would knowledge pack characterizations be used to construct a third-party hardware or software bill of materials for OT assets?
So it's not designed for to generate like an H-bomb or an S-bomb, but we do have a lot of the components of it. So what we can detect are things like, so we can tell you, of course, the model number and the firmware, assuming that it's something that is broadcast on the wire. And then if it's not broadcast on the wire, we can take it as an import, we can take it as an integration. But we can also tell you things like sometimes the components of what it's made of. So there are vendors that were using like code assist, but they weren't necessarily saying they were. We're able to detect that and say, hey, we've code assist detected on this device. So we're not there to provide a full S-bomb or a full H-bomb, but we can give insights into the things that you may not know if the vendor's not provided one. We are going to be doing a little bit more with S-bombs in the future in terms of importing the platform from vendor-provided S-bombs. but from just from the current state of the platform, you can definitely get some insights that you may have not seen before. Same with like VxWorks detection. There's a handful of things like that that sometimes the vendors aren't always pointing out themselves.
Okay, we're getting a little short on time, but I think we can cover a few more here still. So let's do this one next. How are sensors connected to OT assets, and how do we provide evidence that the integrity of the OT data is not affected by the sensors?
So we pull data passively. So we're completely passive in the platform. So if you give us access to a span port or a network tap, or we have an integration with Waterfall where we can get a span port from them, there's lots of things that we can do. We're just passively watching that traffic. So that span port, that span data, if you're using something like a Waterfall, it could be passed through a data diode. So we can't send. We've of course configured the device to not send any traffic on those ports. They're listen only. But if you want to guarantee that 100%, you can feel free to put that, because that is one-way traffic coming to us. We're not sending any traffic out, so it could be passed through a data diode in some cases, assuming it's a vendor that does support that.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more. This is one that I know that you love talking about, Kim, so I'm going to choose this one too. How many sensors can be connected to site store? And if you want to talk about the next level up as well,
Sure.
how many site stores can we connect to a central store?
Yeah, so there's no necessarily upper bound to sensors. We've done a lot of performance testing on sensors, and the number of sensors doesn't matter as much as the amount of aggregated bandwidth. So the aggregate bandwidth is what are all the sensors actually monitoring, not their full capacity, but what are they monitoring on average. A lot of cases you'll see someone has 100, a gig sensor because they need that gig port, but it's running about 250 megs, or they have a 100 meg sensor, it's running maybe 50 megabits, something like that. So if you look at all the aggregate traffic, that's where we're seeing that 20 gigs at the site store itself with all the downstream connected sensors. And that's aggregate bandwidth at its current time frame. So even fully loaded, that's a lot of sensors that could be connected. So it depends on the size of the sensor as to what it could be. Now for central store, we've tested up to 50 in our simulations and in our live testing in our labs. But we're looking at somewhere around 90 gigs of aggregate throughput there. So if we look at the average load that we see in site store platforms, that's actually quite a bit more than 50. But we want to make sure that we see a little bit more of this in the real world before we say it's going to go higher than 50, but it will handle 50. Now, if they're fully loaded site stores all at 20, then obviously the capacity could be lower. But we are going to be doing some more performance enhancements across central store as well. So there's really no hard caps necessarily on these devices. It's all around the aggregate monitor bandwidth, and we'll work with you as much as we can on making sure it's sized correctly.
Yeah, I think we would love to find a situation where the customer environment might stress or even exceed what we believe we can handle. We want those edge cases, so please do.
I love it.
Exactly. Okay, I want to respect our time commitments today. So most of what we discussed on this call, there's more information available online. Dragos.com/platform. There's a recent blog post on a lot of this material. We have different data sheets. When we convert the presentation today to PDF, this slide has links directly to data sheets on the platform, hardware and virtual appliances that Kim discussed, and then also how you can subscribe to the platform, how we license things. And I must mention one of the most amazing opportunities we provide to the community every year. If you're an asset owner or operator, or especially if you're a customer as well, we have an annual conference we host every year. It's called DISC. It's coming up fairly quickly now, and there's no cost to you to attend. This is where we host things like capture the flags that I think are probably the best in the industry. We've got a team that just loves putting the stuff together. They compete in CTFs themselves, so these guys know how to make really good CTFs. So you can come and try the CTF. No pressure if you're just starting out. It's a good way to get some experience, some hands-on. But we also present research that's sometimes sensitive in nature that we don't disclose publicly. So if you're able to join us in person, there will not be an online version of this available. So we encourage you to attend if you can. And the link is on the slide to register, and we would love to see you there. But I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. We take your mission seriously. We know that what you're doing is essential to your customers, and we want you to be able to focus on that and to keep things operating because we all depend on it. So again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.